This week, I'm going to be asking the question, why church? Why church? Each and every week, somewhere in the region of 2.38 billion people go to church. That's nearly 1/3 of the entire world's population. And in fact, there are more than 37 million churches, church buildings, or gatherings in different rooms worldwide. But why? But why bother? Why bother getting up early on a Sunday morning when dragging yourself out of bed and getting into the town centre or wherever that church is gathering? Why? There are lots and lots of different churches, and they all look different. And inside each building is a group of people who are gathering. And all the buildings may look a bit different inside and out. But each church, they're gathering in their own unique way. Last week was definitely unique for us. We had Linz West, who's one of our mission partners, visiting us, and we had drum and bass and house music blaring out the speakers for most of the church gathering, which is what he does when he goes into schools, and it definitely shook the room and shook us. It was great fun. I enjoyed it, at least. And that was unique. But each of the different church flavors, these different gatherings, although the buildings may look different inside and out, they have the same heart. They have that same heartbeat inside them. Whether they are Baptists or Methodists or Anglican Church, or that's the Church of England, or the Gospel Church, the Pentecostal Church, who shout hallelujah and have amazing music. And then you've got the Charismatic Church and the Evangelical Church. That's where you find Riverfall in. They all have the same heart. They all have the same root message, and they all have that same Jesus that we follow. They just might feel a bit different in their Sunday gatherings, each looking unique in their own way. And it's almost like having a town centre filled with lots of different restaurants you can eat out at. Each have got their own flavour. You all have your own favourite of where you like to go out to, but each one still nourishes you. Each one still feeds you, and you walk away with a full stomach. So to answer my question of why church, why do we gather here weekly? We need to answer first the question of what is church. We need to have a look at a tiny bit of the history and then look at what truly makes church unique and different from any other social group out there. So my first question is, what is church? And firstly, there's a common misconception, and that church isn't a building. It's not the place that people gather in. In fact, it's the group of people who are gathered. A church can gather inside a school hall. A church can gather inside a living room. A church can gather inside a old building which is 1,000 years old. You have so Paul, one of the writers of the Bible. He wrote a lot of letters in the New Testament. He has lots of teaching, and in 1 Corinthians, he says that you are the body of Christ, which is kind of a fancy way of saying that you are the group of believers that I'm speaking to, and you are the church. And Jesus reassures his followers in the Gospel of Matthew, saying that where you are gathered, I'm there also with you. So a church gathering is a group, a church is a gathering of believers who then have Jesus gathering alongside them and meeting with them. So God's church isn't just the temple, it's his household, it's his family. And in fact, the Bible goes further to explain that a believer of Jesus is a temple, which is a bit of an odd phrase. We're not going to be exploring that deeply at all today, but there are plenty of verses about that explaining that actually the church is no longer a building, the church is the people. If you look at the early church forming 2,000 years ago, after the death and resurrection and ascension of Jesus, you find some records in a book named Acts, and also through many of Paul's letters. We see that this church, when they started gathering 2,000 years ago, never once mentions a building called church. Yes, there were temples back then, there were synagogues back then, those are for other religions. Jesus never told his followers, go and secure a building and make them into temples to worship me. He was talking and said, come and do life with me. That's Jesus's model, and that continues to be the model of the church to this day. For Jesus, church was family. It was people. He said to Peter, who was one of his disciples, yes, I am there, that top verse. On this rock, he's talking about Peter and his faith. On this rock, I will build my church. And again, the church being not a physical place. Jesus trained and equipped his followers into prioritizing spending time with other people. He even said to a few of his followers who had a trade in fishing, as he was gathering them and calling them, he said to them, I'm going to make you fishers of men. He took the language they understood and then re-explained it for their new purpose in life. No longer were they fishermen who had a job to do catching fish. Actually, they were fishers of men who had a job to go and spend time with people and gather people in. So I think I've said enough about that. We get the picture. The church isn't the building. It's not even a meeting place, but rather it's about the people who are meeting there. So let's get back on track answering the question of why church. And we'll have another glimpse at the early church, who set a model which stood the test of time, which has been nearly unchanged for 2,000 years. And we can ask ourselves the question, what does the church do? What was it doing when it was first built? And therefore, what are we doing now? So I'm going to read a passage from the Bible. It's in the book of Acts, and it was written by Luke, who was the same person who wrote the Gospel of Luke, just for a bit of information. And in Acts, we see the early church forming together. So if you are wanting to follow along, it's Acts 2:42 to 47. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together, and they had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had a need. And every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. The Lord added to their number daily, and to those who were being saved. So it's all about family and community, friendship and support. In these 5 short verses, we get a really clear picture of what those early Christians were doing. And it doesn't look massively different from our day by day, our month by month as River Church now. And I love that you can see in there the selling of their possessions to give away to those that had needs. You could already see the outworking of the church. It wasn't just about the benefit of the people who were gathering together. It was to benefit the community that surrounds them. This would have been very countercultural even back then. It wouldn't have been something that would have been regularly done or readily done. So what they were doing was unique, and they set a model which has stood the test of time. And here at River, how do we see this outworking in our church today? Well, we have hardship funds. We've got community lunches. We do toddler groups, kid clubs, money courses, community sport teams. We do debt relief service. And that's just to name a few things that I thought of within about 30 seconds when I was writing this down. And then we can look at the wider church of Maidenhead across the other churches who gather, who offer language courses, lunches for the elderly, international gatherings, rehab care, food share, street angels, giving of Christmas gifts to those who are in need, coffee on the street, youth clubs, support clubs, counselling, and so much more. I barely had to scan through the headlines of 2 or 3 websites to gather that together. And all of this is being offered off the back of the churches from experienced people who have built up experience, doing it predominantly for free, who have just a massive heart for our town and our community. We haven't even mentioned mission overseas. the support that we send over into countries who are also in need. And there are approximately 500,000 Christian missionaries who are overseas in other nations, supporting the local communities around the world. They are bringing sanitation and education, healthcare, disaster relief, and loads more. CAF, which is the Charities Aid Foundation, released a report last year that 13.9 billion was raised through charitable giving in the UK alone last year, which is just incredible. That charitable giving, some of that would be used within the UK to support those that are homeless or those that are in need in the UK, but a lot of that was going overseas to support those who are needed. So I hope you would agree that the church is a nice bunch of people. So this asks an interesting question about what makes a church unique and different from other social groups. It's an interesting demographic of who you even have here this morning in comparison to what you might find in other social groups, where whatever you might pop to midweek, and I know we all do different things in the middle of our weeks. You're typically, when you're at some of these midweek things, you're surrounded by people who look the same as you. They might be in a similar line of work to you. They might be a similar age to you, have a similar income, live in a similar area. It's comfortable. Ultimately, a social organisation is for the benefit of yourself, the user. You go and you enjoy. You go to your football club, you go to this club, you go to the pub, you do all these different things. It's for the benefit of the user. You go there to share with others, to have a laugh, play sport, have a drink. And in a church, you might find some of these elements too. But the real difference is that the priority there is not for yourself. You come to church to worship God. You go to spend time with others to encourage them. And you then also go to recharge yourself before we go back out again, back out of those doors. And because that's the case, and the only collective similarity we have is our belief in God, it means that our church family here is unique and different, and we can really celebrate that. We are spread over maybe like 90 years of age here from oldest to youngest. We come from all walks of life. We share different nationalities. We are all from all different homes of different income and sizes and background, but we're all here for one collective reason. I've heard the similarity made between church and a half-time at a football match. The game, which is the mission out there, at half-time, you come back in to recharge, to refocus, to reset your vision by hearing from your manager, and then you're encouraging one another, then you run back out again. I also just want to take a moment. I stated a few minutes ago, and I noticed I got a few smiles, that the church is a bunch of nice people. But I also want to recognize that there are times where this hasn't been the case. And I'm not calling out anyone here in this room, don't worry. But I know that there's been a lot of hurt and damage done by the church, by followers of Jesus, using positions of authority to abuse people, both spiritually and physically and other, from those who are in vulnerable positions. And I want to make it really clear the distinction, the real difference between a follower of Jesus and Jesus himself. It might seem obvious, but it's not the same people. As Christians, we should take responsibility when other followers get it wrong, and sometimes get it horribly wrong. We have to recognize that mankind is full of people getting it wrong day by day, and it's not an excuse, but it's merely an observation. But what I'd like to make the differentiation is that I don't want to taint Jesus' name when Christians have got it so wrong and have hurt so many people. And what I'm describing here, this wrong that people have felt, is not the wrong that God has done, but it's the wrong that people have got wrong and done, for which we are deeply sorry for that hurt that's been caused. But what I'd really love for this morning is for an understanding of that, and maybe a reconciliation can begin, a chance of that, where you can consider where maybe you've had a hurt prior in the church. You might be part of our church family. I'm speaking to a whole bunch of people here, and you're carrying hurts from many years. But these hurts aren't hurts what God has done. These are hurts that other people, other followers have done. And we get it wrong. And I apologize when I get it wrong. So as we're talking about church, I thought that was just really important, just to clarify and spend some time just chatting about. I'd like to draw my thoughts together as I'm coming to the end here, and explore one final question, the final piece in asking what is the point of church, and it's why do we gather? So the early church gathered in people's homes. They sat around a dining table. It would have been beautiful. I wish we could do this. We got the size church where this wouldn't be possible. Certainly not every week. We definitely did it one time, though, a while ago, where we gather around a dinner table, and they would. Where am I in my notes? They would encourage each other. They would just discuss things. They would collectively hear from God. They would be taught by others who had had a first-hand experience, first-hand witnesses, or those that had a divine message to share. It was a gathering of faith. It was a gathering of believers. That was what began 2,000 years ago. And this faith is not one of the biggest differences between a church and other social groups, but it's the big difference. It is the primary reason that we gather here on a Sunday morning. We believe that there is a guy called Jesus who walked this earth 2,000 years ago, and that's a fact that is agreed upon by historians and Christians alike. That's an undisputed fact. But we believe that his claims are true, that he was Messiah, that he came to bring a new opportunity and a new hope to humanity, that Jesus was God's rescue plan. We live in a consumer society. We tend to spend our lives consuming content on social media, on television. We love to be entertained. We go to sporting events. We like the theatre. We like our favorite television series. We love to satisfy our hunger for stuff. And that's not even talking about buying things and my addiction to coffee and that click next button on Amazon and it arrives next day through your postbox. But church is or should be the inverse of that. It's not a place to consume. It's a place to receive. It's a time to encourage each other. It's a time of slowing down, to give time to slowing down. It's a time to try to not satisfy our hunger by feeding ourselves content, but actually waiting on God to be fed by God, to be fed by people who are sharing things on a Sunday morning, from one-on-one conversations over a coffee or through our worship. Jesus famously said in John 6:35, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." Now, Jesus isn't saying that he's going to physically feed us with food. We're aware he's done some miracles and done that, but that's not what he's talking about right here. He's talking about our spirit and our mind. That we don't need to endlessly attempt to fill this void which sits inside of us, which we try and cram in doom scrolling of Instagram and flicking between channels and trying to binge watch things and buy things to fill this void which sits inside us. But Jesus is saying, in following him, we no longer need to fill that void because that is finished. That content is filled by Jesus. And we gather because we are grateful for this. We're grateful for Jesus. There's an old book, well, it is an old book. There's an old book in the Old Testament filled with songs of thanksgiving, and it's called the Book of Psalms. It's the biggest book in the Bible with 150 plus chapters. And often the songs we sing here on a Sunday morning are full of some of those words, even though that we use modern instrumentation or melodies. We love to use the scriptures as themes for our worship to feed us and to express how we are feeling, our love for God. And we love to sing these collectively together. That's the big difference about when we worship at our home in our own lives compared to worshiping in a church surrounded by others. We're there to spend time with God, collectively get together to praise and to give him thanks. So why church? It's to surround yourself with others, to collectively worship God, to encourage each other, enjoying time together, and to be there for each other. It's to recharge our batteries, both spiritual and our own earthly bodies. It's a time of slowing down before heading back out onto the mission field, which is out of those doors, which is the actual heart of our church. We don't come here to hide. We come here to recharge, then go back out to spend time in our local communities with those that we love who are up and down our street and in our neighborhoods. We love to be here as a family together. And this isn't an exclusive family either. You can come along and you can gather with us whether you were a follower of Jesus or not. And there's always an open invitation to join God's family as well. We sung right at the beginning of our service that we are part of a big family of God, one of the songs we sung with the all-age worship. And this is why Rich and Rach and Ugoda brought their children here this morning. They made a promise to raise their children with that same understanding and with a collective church family who are going to run along beside them, supporting them. And this is the heart of our church. We're going to invite the band back and they're going to lead us in another song or two. But I just want to leave us with a couple of questions, which I haven't written down. I'm making these up as I go along. If anyone else has got any other questions that they'd like to throw in, they can. But I talked about the hurt of the church. And I would love for this morning to be a time of reconciliation where we've been hurt. We've talked about church, the gathering, the body of Christ. And maybe this is an opportunity for forgiveness and for moving on from hurts that have been sat there festering inside of us. We know that forgiveness is a really powerful time for ourselves, but also for that other person. And you might not be able to go and approach that person and say, I forgive you for the hurt you caused. But actually, for us to release that from inside us is really powerful as well. There's lots and lots of teaching on healing of forgiveness in the Bible. The other question I'd like to ask is what does it cost to be part of a church family? For those that regularly come along and gather along with us, it is a costly time. It's a time where we are giving time because we're giving time to one another. We're giving time to God. Would you describe yourselves as part of our church family as a tight-knit brother and sister as we are looking at God there as the head of the table? Or would you describe yourself more as a distant cousin? And where would you like to be in that journey? And what's it going to cost you in making the next steps of being part of the church family together?